So, starting your sit by settling into your posture. We want to sit in a way that allows us to be alert and still be comfortable and relaxed. And we don't want to be too comfortable where we're kind of slumping, and we don't want to be rigid where we're creating tension. So, as with many things in Buddhism, we're trying to find a middle way or a balanced way to hold the body. And you can close your eyes or just lower your gaze. And I think one of the most revealing moments in a period of meditation is when we first close our eyes, when we first settle in. I'm often kind of already disappointed by how I feel when I close my eyes. I kind of go, oh, I don't feel very meditative right now. Um, but it really doesn't matter, we're not trying to judge ourselves or rank ourselves. And yeah, it can kind of show us that we're in a difficult place, or that we're stressed, or we're tired, or we're anxious, sad. But it's so important to remember that whatever state we're in is not a permanent one. And that in fact, this practice can help us to move into a more comfortable state. And certainly, we don't want to approach practice with expectations, but nonetheless, having a certain amount of trust in the fact that this practice does tend to make us feel better. It's helpful to have that trust. So, however you're feeling, just beginning by checking in with that, recognizing that. Softening the body. We can think of the breath as a kind of calming mechanism as we exhale. So, whenever you exhale, just releasing through the body. Just letting the body be drawn towards the earth, even as you hold yourself upright. But a sense of groundedness, of being held with gravity. Softening the belly, one of the places we tend to hold tension. Letting the breath move into the belly. And just feeling the body sitting here. Can you can you sense that? The whole body. The body is alive, full of sensations, some pleasant, some unpleasant, some neutral. Feeling the mood, feeling the emotional state in the body. How is that felt? Keeping the chest open gives space for feelings, lets them move in the body, not stay as stuck. When we collapse the chest, it has a kind of restricting effect on the mood. It's very strange the way the body and mind, the way emotions are so tied in with the body. But we know how it feels after a workout, a nice buoyant mood in the body. So as we become more attuned through our meditation practice, we see that those shifts in our mental state are actually tied to the way we are holding our body in any given moment. And sometimes we might want actually to kind of collapse that. We might feel that we want to kind of defend the heart, defend the chest. So it's really helpful to tune into the subtle shifts that happen when you make subtle changes in the way you hold the body. And then letting the breath become your focal point, feeling the breath at the nostrils or the belly, just the sensations, the touch of breath at the nostrils or the movement of breath in the belly. And noticing the movements of mind. When the mind gets lost in thoughts, just gently bringing it back. And other times there might just be a sense of thoughts moving through consciousness so that there's still a present moment awareness. But we just realize that there's this chatter or hum in the mind. And we let it go, we let it come and go, just come through. when the bell rings, just notice how you're feeling then. Notice if there's been any change during this period. Lovely. So, as I was thinking this week, as I was noticing that I sort of didn't know what I was going to talk about tonight, and usually some theme sort of emerges or something out of what we've been covering, and so I looked at the book One Breath at a Time, and there's one more section in it that I'll probably read from it on Tuesday, maybe tonight. We'll see how it goes, but um, and it's kind of wrapping up the step 4 material. But what I realized I wanted to talk about um, is kind of this idea of inventory and the kind of contrast between the idea of a traditional 12-step inventory and what it is that I'm kind of proposing uh, as kind of a Buddhist inventory. And really, I'm proposing a variety of things. Um, but step 4 in the 12 steps is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And so the term moral seems to really define what we're talking about. Um, and, for those of you who have done this, I hope and suspect many of you have, if not all of you, um, it's a process of mostly going back over our lives and reflecting on the harm we've done. And of course, the AA Big Book has kind of a framework for doing it, and then different 12-step programs have different models for it. Uh, but mostly that's what it seems to be. It can focus in different ways, and it can get very particular in regards to like different types of activities or behaviors. But it's mostly this kind of reflection on the harm we've done, uh, which I think is an incredibly valuable thing to do. Um, and but I think it's valuable not so much for even for what's uncovered, which is useful, but I think the exercise in itself in really admitting to these things. I mean, step 5 is the one where we admit, but this idea of really taking responsibility for the harm we've done in our lives, I think is so important, and it really, to me, sets us on the path of the 12 steps. It really solidifies where we're going with the 12 steps in terms of that rigorous honesty and that necessity to reflect on our own shortcomings, and especially to be accepting of those, both in terms of not being defensive, uh, but also not feeling shame particularly, or even guilt. That's not the point of it, right? And that's one of those are some of the hard parts of doing this process, in getting caught up in those kind of feelings. But uh, hopefully, if you have a good sponsor or a good guide in this, and you sort of understand what you're doing, that you are, uh, guided away from that kind of thinking around this. Nonetheless, I think that's something that can be a real pitfall, and it's one of the reasons why I have this idea of also taking positive inventory, so that we're not just caught in this sort of negative cycle of self-reflection. Um, so that's my very sort of simple view of, or summary about what I think step 4 is about, and it certainly doesn't encompass all of it, and I'm sure other folks here have other ideas that maybe you want to contribute at some point. But what I wanted to look at, though, is just to sort of uh, look at the contrast between that and the things that I'm kind of proposing as Buddhist inventories. And I say that plural very intentionally, because they are different inventories, and they operate very different. Each of them has its own sort of particular, uh, not just focal point, but way that it can and probably needs to be approached. So to start with, um, and I was thinking I might just share my screen on this. Um, go through these lists. Where's my screen share? There it is. And where's the screen that I want to share? There it is. All right. So you can see that, right? So Buddhist Lists, this is this page I just made up. And so I start with the 5 hindrances, uh, because I think of them as sort of the most essential uh, challenges that we face in meditation. And so we would definitely call this a meditative inventory. Actually, I'm going to scroll down so you're not tempted to look at the next list. um, and so here this this kind of inventory is one that we do kind of actually while we are meditating, which is a very distinct thing. That's clearly not something that's in the 12 steps. There's no idea in the 12 steps that you're going to meditate and take an inventory during your meditation. At least I've never seen anything like that. So this is sort of a different kind of idea around what inventory might mean. And I think it then starts to highlight what it is that I'm suggesting that inventory can be, which is that it's not just a sort of personal recollection of things we've done, harm that we've done, but that it can be just we could call it maybe more accurately, investigation of what's going on. So the 5 hindrances are a key thing, and that it's, practically every Buddhist book, or Western Buddhist book anyway, at least, covers the hindrances. And a lot of times when you're in meditation retreat, they'll go through the hindrances. They're the things that are really important to explore as we practice. But they also can be looked at in more general terms, in the sense of, do I have a tendency to have this issue show up in my daily life, or in my ordinary uh, mind, not just meditating, uh, because the hindrances clearly are not things that only happen when we're meditating. So that gives us sort of a secondary way of looking at the hindrances. Oh, do I tend to have a lot of aversion, or do I tend to be really restless, or is doubt a real problem for me? But we can see that that's different. That's more of an inventory, we might say, of qualities rather than behaviors, uh, or shortcomings or certainly the hindrances would never be called character defects in Buddhist terms, because they're seen as very universal, which is another aspect of how I would sort of characterize a Buddhist inventory, that it tends toward the universal, and because we're trying to get out of the idea of selfing and it's me and it's my problems, but to see ourselves in more general terms. It's just like having these universal human qualities. So the next list I have is the first positive inventory list. And this, again, is meant to kind of counterbalance the negative view. Um, uh, of course, uh, to say it's positive is really just to say that these qualities are positive, but you might do your inventory and get a very negative view about it, like, oh, I'm not very, joyful, or I'm not very tranquil. And so, but what I would say with the seven factors, because the seven factors of awakening are really an important list in Buddhism for obvious reasons, because these are the qualities that, when they're brought to fruition, you know, create awakening, create enlightenment. So it seems like a really good idea to know what they are, and further to kind of try to develop them. So that's the idea to me of the seven factors of awakening inventory, is to see which of these qualities do I really need to cultivate more, and then to investigate, well, how can I do that? At the same time, we can take some joy in seeing ones that we feel like we have developed to some extent. And so, but this inventory, in a sense, is an inventory of where we are on the path of awakening, you know, to kind of see, oh, like when these kind of come into fruition, when they start to come together, when you have moments, uh, when it feels like, wow, these are really in balance. Uh, it can be very inspiring. It can be like, wow, this is really something starting to happen here. And you have those moments, and of course, then everything changes, and everything goes away. But this is useful, I think, in that regard, and kind of partly to try to check where we are on our path, but then and to sort of what do I really need to work on if I want to attain this. The thing that when I first encountered the seven factors, the thing that excited me the most was that they existed, that there were factors of awakening, that it wasn't just something that randomly happened, because I thought, oh, like enlightenment, just like you get struck enlightened, or, you say the right mantra or whatever, and to realize, oh, according to the Buddha, there's stuff you do, and here it is. So the next list is the five precepts, which seems like a pretty logical uh, thing to take an inventory of. And now we're back in the moral inventory, right? This is very much more like a 12-step inventory. Um, take the training precept to refrain from killing, to refrain from taking that which is not given, to refrain from sexual misconduct, refrain from harsh and false speech, refrain from taking intoxicants. Now, this list, of course, for the people in recovery, and particularly people who are in recovery from substance abuse, the good news is, if you're clean and sober, that you've already got one of them down, and that's always good news, I think, to know, like, oh yeah, I've kind of got that. But this, this list, as it can be a reflection on harm you've done, but it's much more, again, a kind of guideline for, oh, what do I need to cultivate? Are there certain ones of these that my behavior really isn't in harmony with the precept? Um, and and the one of the beauties of the precept is when we see the particularly engaged Buddhism, that uh, the ways that these are broadened, and I think that's the most interesting aspect of them, taking things like uh, not taking the second precept, to refrain from taking that which is not given, and thinking of that in terms of uh, overusing resources, and a kind of the to realize, like, oh, the entire Western world takes takes from the poorer parts of the world, the wealthy countries that take from the poor ones and exploit them. We can get very subtle about sexual misconduct, right? To really see that it's more than, necessarily sleeping with the wrong person, but that it can be very subtle the way we are unskillful in that. And the speech, which is going to be really the main focus of when we get to step 5, this is something that seems to challenge everyone, uh, uh, you know, from the most experienced meditators to the beginners. So, and intoxicants as well, I think it'd be very interesting to think about, how do I intoxicate myself beyond just substances? And then finally, I have the 10 paramitas is what we were most recently doing. And I didn't, and I'm not planning to go through all 10 paramitas, just because, I don't know, just because it just didn't quite. But I picked out certain ones that I thought were particularly worth exploring: renunciation and determination. Um, but this is another list which is kind of like the 7 factors. We would think of it as a positive inventory, uh, but it gives us another way of kind of reflecting on our own. How developed we are with these qualities. So let's go up here and edit the page now. Um, do you still see the page, or do I need to? Okay, because I know that if you change pages when you're, now we'll do the Noble Eightfold Path. And right view, right intention, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right, and right concentration. All right. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, because this is, we can spend the next 4 months on the Noble Eightfold Path, and maybe we will at some point next year after we get through the 12 steps. But this is kind of the path, the bigger view of the path, and is again something that we can kind of look at and think about what really needs to be developed. And I think it's really interesting to see how, particularly, in Western Buddhism, we focus so much on mindfulness and concentration. The 3: effort, mindfulness, concentration, are the 3 that are, uh, uh, about meditation. And I think we often overlook some of the others. Livelihood, right action is the 5 precepts. So right speech, right view is really, in a way, right view is the most important. I mean, in the sense that it's the thing that, it's what means that we're really seeing things accurately. I mean, it's kind of just redundant to say it that way, but so much, so much of our problem is our tendency to um, not understand, or to put the wrong meaning on things, to interpret things wrong. And a lot of that is about ego and about self. And so when we develop right view, there's, a lot more kind of spaciousness and and I would say equanimity as well, because um, you're not you're not as disturbed by things when you have right view. Anyway, let's update this page. Oh, you guys are in my way. I have to get you out of my way. Okay, good. And I will stop sharing. So 5 daily remembrances. Oh yeah, thanks, Eleanor. That's the other one. We did that for a couple days. See, I have to take a searching and fearless moral inventory of my teaching, I guess. Um, I'll throw that in there. Yeah, it's been a long, strange trip with the fourth step, man. You never knew it was such a problem. Um, I don't even know if all of that is inventory. I don't, it's just sort of how I've approached this. When I embarked on writing this book, one breath at a time, I started writing it really in 2002, but I had already been working on the ideas in it for a few years. But when I embarked on that, I didn't have any model for it, and I didn't have um, anything to base it on, because I had never seen anybody do what I was doing. But one thing I knew was that I wanted to get all these teachings into the book. So part of what I was doing was finding, well, where can I put this? Where does this fit? It wasn't always like just obvious, intuitive, natural connection. It was like, well, I have to put the Eightfold Path in there. Where does it go? And so I don't know if it's right. I don't, it's not, I mean, to say, oh, Buddhism and the 12 steps, and here's how they fit together. I think that's, on my part, it's just uh, an opinion, you know. It's just, but what's important to me isn't, oh, does, this list fit in this step, or where does that fit? It's that I want that I do it all, that I work the 12 steps, and that I use Buddhism, that Buddhism is my sort of guiding light for it. And what step I'm on isn't so important to me as just, you know, getting it all, bringing it all together. So I think that's enough from me tonight. Um, uh, so it'd be nice to hear some other voices tonight, and hear how people are doing. This continues to be a challenging time in the world. There's a 3 after the at the end of the date today, and the next time that there's a 3 after the date, it's going to be a significant one. I'm having my teeth cleaned that day, so it's a very important day. November 3rd. Something else happening that day. Actually, I voted today, so I'm done. Um, I've been calling people in Pennsylvania, uh, and it seems like they've all voted too. So I don't even know why they don't just start counting now. Maybe we could have the inauguration in December. Get on with it. Okay, sorry, this is not the topic of the evening. That's what happens when I digress. But I'd love to hear any thoughts tonight, any sharing anybody has. And you are welcome to just unmute yourself, or if you want to be more formal and raise your hand with the button, we can do that too. I'm listening. I don't hear anything. All right, I'm going to go back to editing my website, and you can just tell me when you have something to say. All right, that's not nice, is it? Sorry. Wow. If this were an AA meeting, I'd call on somebody. I think I'll call on somebody. Eleanor, you chimed in. Why don't you say something for us? You're a regular.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. I guess for me, I'm just constantly reflecting on something that you said to me a long, long time ago, which is it's my program. It's, and that's what I hear you saying again tonight, is that there's all this information out there about how you can organize um, your investigation of your recovery, your investigation of your spiritual life, and there's ways to guide how you think about it. There's ways to guide you on the path, but there's no one correct way. And the task is to remain vigilant and about how it's working out, and
Yeah.
That's working for me. So I deeply appreciate it's not always fun. It's not always moving forward. It feels a lot, especially now in these COVID times, of massive bouts of stuckness and some revelations and a lot of fear and disappointment. So, it's the path, but it feels real to me. So I thank you again for your guidance in this way.
Yeah. Thank you, Eleanor.
You're welcome. I'm grateful to you.
No. What I would add, it's also your meditation, all right? And that's, you've heard me say that as well, that
Yeah.
people have to find their own practice, I mean, our mind, like our body, is individual, and has individual qualities. And when we try to fit, like if you go to a yoga class, if you've ever gone to a yoga class and the teacher does something, you're like, okay, I'll do that. And you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, because it was like that didn't really fit your body well. And it's not quite the same kind of pain in meditation, but sometimes it can be when the teacher's like, do this, and you're like, I'm trying to do it. What's wrong? Why can't I do it? My brain feels like it's getting stretched too far. And so I think just like we have to adapt our meditation or our yoga poses or our qigong poses, as Greg would say, I think we have to learn to adapt our meditation in the same way that we have to make our program work for us. It would be nice, if there were just one way.
This is Angela. I buried Dana's comment, but I just, I don't know, maybe there's more you could say about it. I was thinking she just likes how you divided, well, I sent it, I don't know if you want to read it, but how you divided chapters in the table of contents.
Yeah. Well, again, that was, thank you for bringing that back up. Yeah. Again, that was very sort of intuitive and just kind of like it, partly it's like a writer trick to have different parts in a book. When you read a novel, it's like part one, part two, part three, and sometimes it's just a way of, it's actually meant to help the reader. It's not necessarily whatever true, but it seemed to me that it was just like kind of a way of helping the whole picture of the book to look structurally like, and to help you think about the steps in these as these three different stages. And certainly there's nothing, brilliant or original about that division. I think anybody who's been around the 12 steps for a long time would almost inevitably make that division of 1, 2, and 3, because when you go into 4, there's a big shift, and 4 through 9 are a process, that's really like go together. And then 10, because it's going back, it's basically saying, oh, keep doing 4 through 9 all the time. Well, that seems to be starting another thing, which is why I call that fulfillment, right? But sometimes I talk about that as, or they're talked about as the maintenance steps, right? But it seemed like, okay, that's the last 3 steps, because 10, particularly 11 and 12, are very distinctly different from earlier steps. I mean, you could say, 11 is kind of similar to 3 because there's like higher power, but basically you have this um, sort of different stage, and many people, we can kind of think of 10, 11, and 12 as the ones that we're going to be doing all the time, right? Although, step 1, I think, always needs to kind of be there, but the idea that I'm going to stay on top of my inventory, I'm going to keep up my spiritual practice, I'm going to do service, and practice these principles in all of my affairs. That's kind of the ongoing process. So that seemed like just a natural way of dividing the steps. And yeah, it is something about, when I've taught creative writing or just taught composition, one of the things you have to teach young people, and maybe older people too sometimes, is like to make paragraph breaks. Like they'll just like hand in one long page and it's just like there's no paragraph breaks. And it's the paragraph breaks aren't for the writer. They're for the reader. They help you to see, oh, right now this is slightly different. These are shifts, and it helps your eye. And so I think of those 3 sections as just something to help the reader and to think about the process they're looking at.
This is Angela again. Since no
Go ahead,
one's
Angela.
talking, I figure I might as well. Something just popped in my head again as I was looking at what you were saying. And I just wanted to put another like plug in for right view and perception. Like I've been, you mentioned it a while back at the beginning of a class, and I was sharing it with someone else and we were talking more about it. And it's just been a really helpful thing for me to kind of reflect on. And so talking about right view again, even just, briefly, was helpful. And yeah, I've also reflected a few times on that story you told. I can't remember if it was who it was, Ajahn Chah or something, that like showed up and, no one came to pick him up and he just had to fast for, yeah.
Ajahn Amaro, yeah.
Ajahn Amaro, yeah. I'm like, wow, I just, that kind of, to be able to have that kind of equanimity, and I see just like slowly,
Yeah.
even just in this small time, I guess, of having more spaciousness, even if it's just brief moments of it or, but yeah, it's helpful things to remember. So.
Yeah. For those who don't know that story, it's one that Ajahn Amaro, who's an English monk, but in the Thai forest tradition, having ordained with Ajahn Chah, and he says that he once flew into New Delhi, and someone was supposed to pick him up at the airport, and they didn't show up. And as a monk, he's not allowed to like just go to the restaurant and buy something. Partly he doesn't have any money on him, but even if he did. And so, but I guess they did have a hotel arranged for him. So he went to the hotel and just like meditated until the next day when the person showed up and like, oh, oops, sorry, I was a day late. Like, and then he got fed, so that is equanimity. Yeah, right view is something, Bhikkhu Bodhi says, right view is both the beginning of the path and then perfected right view is the end of the path, which makes sense in a way. Right view, if you don't have a certain amount of right view, you just don't get on the path. So that just means that you kind of understand, oh, there's something that's not right. It's kind of like, this isn't quite working, which is like in Buddhist terms, we say that's a recognition of that there is suffering and there's something, you sort of see that life doesn't kind of work the way you want it to. And so that sort of opens this investigation, this question like, well, how can I resolve this? How can I get out of this suffering? And so that's kind of the beginning of the path. And for an addict, right view is that realizing, oh, there's something that's not right. I'm suffering. And we and recognizing that it's this behavior, this addiction. And then when right view is fulfilled, it means that you totally see everything. Like you're just like, you understand causality. You you don't just understand. It's not intellectually understanding. It's just a deep insight that frees you from clinging. So frees you from suffering. Uh, that's the transformation. It is said. Just to make clear that I'm not speaking of from personal experience. Although, of course, the point is that we do experience that in, as you said, Angela, in small bits. We get a taste of it, and that's what gives us the faith to continue on. We have that moment of, right, I just let go of that, and I feel better. And of course, that's the thing that I think connects it so well to the 12 steps. That's how we see the freedom that comes from letting go of our addiction. So before I go, I'll open the floor to Abigail, who has her hand up in the virtual way.
I just realized what time it is. So I'll just make this
No,
really,
fine.
really, speaking of right view, the political climate has brought that to mind, because generally speaking, I talk to people who kind of see things the same way I do,
Right.
it seems. But I have a very, very dear friend who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so in talking to her, it's difficult because I'm faced with, do I have the right view? Where is it coming from? And then right speech, how can I communicate it? Yeah. And it's been a real challenge. And luckily she keeps saying to me, thank you for being patient. Thank you for being understanding. So I haven't made an enemy. Yeah. But it's hard. And well, you've done it on the phone.
Yeah. And just, most of the people that, you get through to on phone banking are Democrats. And so, but occasionally you get somebody, well, the people who apparently, are voting the other way just swear at you and hang up. So that's easy. I've only had a few of those, but a couple people have said they were undecided. And then when I said, well, what's the most important thing to you? They would bring up, things that seem to be points from what I would say the other side. They'd been watching Fox News, I'll put it that way. And having a conversation with them about that without getting, telling them what I think, that they're they're idiots, you know, and being, you know, being is really, it's great practice. It is a great practice. And I find that I can do it for a few minutes, but if it goes on for a while, I start getting more emotional, you know. But
Yeah.
I had a long talk, one guy who said like, you know, the thing that was most important to him was killing babies. And so I said, okay, well, abortion is a very difficult topic, you know, and you know, and it was really interesting because I was able to actually say what I believe, you know, rather than sort of, you know, getting angry. I was like, it's really a tough. I get it. Like it is hard, you know. It's nobody supports that, you know. Anyway, it is really interesting to try to uh, actually talk to people when people are willing to talk. It's great, right? Because then you can like go, oh, okay, well, let's talk about what we really think and feel about this rather than just sort of pronouncing things. And I'll close with this little piece, which is Pauline Kael, who was I'm sure many of you have heard of her. She was a, a film critic for, I think, the New Yorker,
Yeah.
and probably the New York Times. But after Nixon was elected in like 68 or 72, she was quoted as saying, "How could he have gotten elected? Nobody voted for him." And and what she was saying, and so that became like an actual like I don't know if we call it a meme, but like kind of a Kaleism or something that they call it, when when you're so siloed and that you don't know anybody who's voting for the other side, right? So you're like, how
Right.
could that person get elected? No, and it's this belief that you are in tune with everybody, and obviously we're not. You know? So there's a couple of dozen people that apparently disagree with me.
It's distressing.
Yeah, it is. It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I will be back here in this same seat on this same channel. Happy to see that the um, password, the embedded password, worked. And we want to thank Angela for putting that together. Excellent. Good work. Thank you. And we'll see. We'll transition into step 5, but may do some little. Maybe we'll do a day on just meditation. I like to do that, but we'll see. I hope everyone has a safe weekend and find some joy. I recommend some joy and some health, and don't drink or use or act on your addiction, no matter what. And if you have an impulse to, please contact a trusted friend. Okay. Good night.